Good evening and welcome to our usual Wednesday evening book study. We're studying Christian Anarchism by Alexander Christianopoulos. And we are in chapter 2, section number 6, and the chapter is headlined Not Judging One Another. And this is the story about the adulteress who was about to be stoned, and Jesus kind of rescues her. It that it abolished the law, but to fulfill it. So he has a completely different view of what the law is than these Pharisees and scribes have. And so they bring this woman to him, a woman who has been caught in adultery, and according to the law of Moses, so Jesus tells them, "He that is without any sin among you, let him first cast a stone at her." And they all drop their stones and go home. Nobody would say that they were sinless, so that nobody threw any stones at her. And then he tells her that he doesn't condemn her either. So this is the story that's the basis for the idea that we should not judge one another. There are, in this chapter 3, and Jews, and of course Tolstoy. So I personally like and I'll get back to why I do that later on. First, Hennacey. Hennacey says that Jesus gave us this method of overcoming evil when he said, "The woman caught in sin, he without sin among you cast the first stone." But he goes further than that. He really says that if you vote for a governor or president who appoints the hangman or the jailer, then these men are your servants. They are your arm to throw the stone, and you deny Christ. Christians who are not sinless condemn and stone one another through the long arm of the state. They do the opposite of what Jesus teaches in this passage. And that is consistent with what we have heard all along, that the state is evil. The state is the work of Satan, demonic. And the idea is that when you you cannot absolve yourself of sin by letting the state do the dirty work for you. And that is a lot of anarchist writers who say that. Andrew is a little bit different. He says, "Judge for yourself what is right." And that the reference for that is in Luke 12:57. I didn't look that up, but I believe that is right. And I think the idea is that God trusts us to make the right choices. But we fail him all the time. We saw that in the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve. They had the choice to do the right thing, and they didn't. So, and Andrew says that judge for yourself what is right, but he warns, so this is the thing, that do not judge unless you are prepared to be judged. And this is the same, or at least a parallel to the places where it says that if you exercise evil against somebody, then you implicitly allow them to exercise evil against you. And the same thing with sin, with forgiveness. If you do not forgive others, then you can't really expect anybody else to forgive you as well. So I think that's pretty much in line with what Andrews here says, unless you're prepared to be judged. And that, I think, is really consistent with what Jesus is trying to tell us here, that we are responsible for our own choices. Andrew says, wanted people to accept responsibility for their own problems and accept the responsibility of making their own judgments. And he therefore explained that they shouldn't project the responsibility onto another else either, particularly the experts, or the elected officials and so forth. So yeah, he wants people to judge for themselves. Yeah. So the chapter here says that Andrews is kind of alone in this position, but I think this is absolutely right. Most anarchists say that there is a prohibition against not judging at all, and I think Hennacey is in that camp. Tolstoy definitely is. He says here, let's see, for Tolstoy, therefore, Jesus forbids everyone to go to law, and since he repeatedly enjoins forgiveness, a Christian cannot be a punishing judge. So I don't really personally think that Jesus recommends, that actually forbids anything. He always leaves that door open that we can make the right choice on our own. But apparently I'm in the minority here as well, along with Dave Andrews. So yeah. So Tolstoy gives some examples of why this is so. For Christian anarchists, this implies rejection of human courts of justice is clear, which is what we've seen all along. That is Jesus' rejection of state authority, military, and all those things. Tolstoy's follows quote illustrates this. Jesus says, "Resist not evil. The object of the courts is to resist evil." Jesus says, "Return good for evil." The courts render evil for evil. So our justice systems is based on retaliation, a tooth for a tooth, and eye for an eye. Jesus says, "Do not classify men as good or bad." The courts are occupied only with making this distinction. So the only thing the courts do is to sort people into good and bad people. Jesus says, "Forgive all men, forgive not once, not 7 times, but without end." That what we saw last time. Forgiveness is endless. Or God's forgiveness is endless, and so should ours. And ours should be so as well. Love your enemies, do good to those who hate you. The courts do not forgive, but punish. They render not good, but evil to those whom they call the enemies of society. So that's Tolstoy's take on that, and we can agree with that, absolutely. But this is where I don't agree with Tolstoy. that Jesus forbids everyone to go to the law. It is, in my opinion, something that we choose on our own. Sometimes we make the right choice, sometimes we don't. Another thing that Tolstoy is saying here is that Tolstoy observes that the earliest teachers of the church invariably distinguished their teaching from all others, precisely by never admitting in it either compulsion or judgment. And I think that's, I don't know, it seems almost a little bit like Tolstoy is contradicting himself here, that that the teachings of, and this is because of Epistle of James and Epistle of Paul to the Romans. He's basing this on that invariably distinguish their teaching from all others precisely by never admitting in it either compulsion or judgment. So I think that the teaching does not include compulsion or judgment. Definitely not compulsion. Not judging one another and not resisting evil, according to Tolstoy, were the defining principles of the early Christian community. I can agree with definitely not resisting evil is a foundational part of the teaching of Christ. For Christian anarchists, therefore, Jesus' explicit and implicit teaching on judgment clearly condemns the state's judicial system. So in other words, the idea that we can have the state do the dirty work for us. We can't. When we hang somebody, it is just as bad as if we did it ourselves. Christians should not judge one another, or foreigners should at least not call upon third parties to do so. And therefore, when the state's institutions judge and condemn, they behave in direct contradiction to Jesus' instruction. So this idea that the state, we can kind of get rid of our sins simply by letting the state do it for us is ridiculous and in contradiction to the teachings of Jesus. Okay, so that was about judging, and next week we're going to talk about being servants. Yeah. Thank you for coming. I appreciate that. I wish you would be able to join us here at the live meeting. But if you have comments, but if you're not and you have a chance to watch this video later on and you have a comment, please put it in the comment field in the video, and we will address it in another session. Thank you.